All right. Hi, Jose. Thank you for joining me on our podcast today, our DeFi Crash Course. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about how you got into crypto and specifically how you joined the Metis team?
Actually, yeah, for sure. My name is Jose. I'm from Panama, and I got into Metis just by being really interested in crypto. To be honest, crypto is just what I'm passionate about. So I was writing a lot about protocols. I started reading about Metis, and I was like mind blown. So I started writing about Metis, and one thing led to another, and now here am I in Metis.
Yeah, you joined our team. What's it's been like maybe what a month now that you've been with us or a month and a half? You've just like hit the ground running and started taking over a lot of things and have really been an asset to our team. So I'm really glad you joined. So let's talk about DeFi. You're kind of like the DeFi wizard on our team, and um, I think this is a big pull for people to get into crypto, but it can be really overwhelming because there are so many new terms and it's almost like learning another language. So I'm hoping that we can use today's episode to explain some of the fundamentals, and then maybe in future podcasts we can talk more specifically about some of the more complicated mechanisms. But let's just get started with an explanation of what DeFi is. Like, what does it mean for finance to be decentralized?
Absolutely. Okay, so I mean, DeFi is my favorite part of crypto, like no doubt, because as you said, is decentralized. Like a lot of times, the reason why people coming from different backgrounds cannot get access to this type of banking institutions or banking services is because there's one centralized institution that says, "No, like you're not the type of client that we want," and they can just refuse for people to get that type of services. Therefore, these people end up losing or not being able to access financial services that have been a big differentiator factor for different classes, for different people, and for successful investors overall. Like the ability to get your monthly income and just being able to transform it into something way larger and goes compounding is like something completely unbelievable, completely good, and completely inaccessible for a lot of people. So this is where DeFi comes in and kind of like opens the door for all these people, opens the door for a whole new audience to be able to access this type of services. And even though if there's a centralized institution that wouldn't be okay with that, doesn't matter because we all have the same rights and we all have a right to engage in this type of activity. It shouldn't be something that is restricted to one class or one type of people in general. So I'm very optimistic about DeFi's future and DeFi's role, kind of like creating an even play field for all type of people to be able to successfully engage with finances.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's been the most exciting thing for me to learn as I've been introduced to DeFi is just the idea that people can have sovereignty over their money and have more control. There's no intermediary or person trying to control what we do with the money, and no one as acting as a gatekeeper for financial services. And yesterday, so I'm at NFTLA right now, and yesterday I listened to a keynote speech in the one of the main audiences, and the the speaker Yatsu was saying that even though people feel overwhelmed or unsure about the mechanisms of DeFi, but even more specifically, how data can be monetized in Web3, and how they don't want to like monetize, for example, their gaming experience or anything like that, just because it adds an element of finances to something that they consider play. It's not really an option. Like your data is still being used to make money, but by someone else. And your gaming experience is still putting money in the pockets of someone else. Your financial services are still being controlled by someone else. And it's not really an option anymore to not understand or like take part of it in the Web3 space, because it's up to you to control where that information goes. So it's really exciting to see that with the right educational tools, people can really like make some real change for themselves, and not just personally, but like they can share that with their communities, and it has the power to really shift this like global perspective to a more abundant one, which is really exciting.
Really touch a crucial point right there with the gaming platforms, because that's another kind of like big area in which people, like, now everyone can be able to access this type of like gaming platforms in which they can grow an audience, they can actually make money from it. Before, people could only monetize from, let's say, gaming or these type of platforms if they pretty much had a bank account. That was the only way. Then digital wallets started coming along, but they would still matter to the same type of, how would you say, control, centralized control. Institutions could say no, like you cannot access your funds. Crypto is changing this, and now like DeFi is giving the opportunity for people to take all these funds and actually convert them in something like long lasting and sustainable, just as regular people like in real life do with the regular jobs and grab their incomes and put them away as investments in stocks, as investments in different type of like bonds, kind of like how do you call it, fixed rent. So it's this is the same way, like it's giving people the same type of alternatives, but now like people are not needing that type of like bank account. People are able to do it without the authorization of no centralized institution.
Yeah, exactly. And for people who like really don't know, DeFi is decentralized finance, which I think we've said, but to be clear, it's just it's being able to participate in financial services without an intermediary or like a central bank that controls it. So in DeFi, you are in charge of your assets, and we talked about it when you and I were discussing kind of like an analogy that would make it easy for people to understand. You mentioned like a bakery or maybe like a buffet line, whereas centralized finance is like you go to a restaurant, you sit down, and a waiter comes and offers you a menu of services which you pay for, or maybe like a menu of food that you buy. Um, but we could think of DeFi more as like a self-service buffet. Like you have everything laid out for you, and it's your job to choose like what you want to take a piece of, you know? Um, and I think that that is an easy way of thinking about it in terms of like, you don't have to wait for someone else to bring you your food now. You don't have to wait for banks to facilitate a transaction. You can choose to have as much of whatever's on the buffet as you'd like, instead of like maybe having a set menu of options. And it can be immediate. Like there's no there is a small lag, but like rather than it being days to send money anywhere in the world, you can do it instantly, just about. So those things are really helpful, I think, when people are trying to consider, why would I want to get into this if making a lot of money is not like high on my priority list? If you just consider the idea that you have more control, I think that's the thing that's most appealing to me.
One of the things that you forgot to mention also kind of like complements all of what you're saying is once you're at the buffet, you grab your food, you don't have to tip the waiter as well. Like there's no waiter. You grab your food, so you get to save that extra money. In other terms, if we were about to see it as a pie, to say it like that, that's an example that I love. I know Ashley doesn't love it, but I do. So if we can get and look at it as a pie, it's literally like we getting the whole piece. Like it's now not being divided among three pieces, let's say. So like me, the sender, the receiver, and the intermediary, or just both participants and the intermediary. In this case, the whole pie is going to participants, users, people that actually like putting money in play or doing or actually have the ownership of those funds. You see, so this is a very good thing for people that are actually like trying to how do you say it, for people that are trying to cut costs, for people that are not familiar with or don't have access to, like we said, centralized institutions, this makes everything better and makes not just things more accessible, but more attractive for the average user who doesn't want to save some money knowing that there's no trust involved. Everything is trustless and code is law. So pretty much no risks if the code has no risks.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Just the idea that with DeFi, like your transactions are on a blockchain. So what that means is that every transaction is on a public ledger that anyone can view. And with a traditional banking system, those ledgers are all private. It works similarly in that like transactions and balances are recorded, but in a banking system, that information is held by the bank and they have the power to control what's recorded. And also they're susceptible to hacks, and that happens actually a lot. Like the Federal Reserve is the organization in the United States that kind of like controls the circulation of fiat currency of the US dollar. And in my lifetime alone, they have been hacked like over, I think, 50 times. So a blockchain is really interesting because it's not possible really for someone to go in there and change the information. And that establishes this level of trust. Like I can see that this money was sent at this time, it's time stamped. There's no changing that transaction. There's no going back and trying to make it look like it wasn't finalized. Like the end state is there. And I think that's really powerful when we think about, for example, like the amount of money that a bank has to have in reserve. And you see this number on the screen of how much money you think you have in your account, but it's not necessarily true that you could just go to a bank and immediately withdraw it all. Like and it's not necessarily the case in crypto. And so I think having that understanding of how the banking system really works makes DeFi seem that much more attractive. And then beyond that, like we live in a really uncertain world, and that's always been the case. But I think recently people have been more and more aware of that. We've been really forced to face this kind of insecure existence that we all live, and with political conflict and war and protests and governments freezing bank accounts and keeping people barred from access to their funds. I think DeFi and crypto are on the rise in terms of feeling like you have more control over what you need and when you need it.
Also, banks have always been seen as the winning industry or as the big industry, kind of like a very promising industry because the products that they were offering were very promising as well. But nowadays, I mean, I'm not going to say that they're not promising or they're not a good alternative for people that are not investing funds at all. But if we go to the DeFi space, we're going to find hundreds of more attractive opportunities, more lucrative opportunities that people are taking advantage of. So I think that, like you said, the kind of like the amount of alternatives that people get is a very big thing, as well as you were also mentioning. I think that the bank can get in between what you want to do or not, and that's also the case if we look at the example of, let's say, Canada and the truckers. The truckers had, I don't want to get political in here. Like I don't, it's not really, I just want to use it as an example for how everything is neutral. So they were in the middle of the blockage, kind of like they were asking for funds and no donations could get to them, or through GoFundMe or through any other platform. And if platforms were actually accepting donations, they were taking a big piece of it, kind of like a big percentage for them. So this was pretty unfair for people that were trying to actually help another country or another or a group of people in this case. And the fact that crypto was the only alternative for them to kind of like turn to, it's a big thing. And this combined with like crypto being kind of like an opportunity that everything can trust, that everyone can rely on, combined with the fact that DeFi is starting to offer the highest quality financial products that we can see like from a lucrative perspective, it's definitely gonna make a boom. People are definitely gonna start noticing it, not only in the crypto industry, outside of the crypto industry as well. Whenever they start wondering what is the best, alternative for me to put these funds on, they're gonna find out.
Yeah, awesome. And like you kind of touched on, like there are so many different ways for people to leverage their funds to get more in DeFi. And I do want to be clear that there is still risk involved in any kind of investment, really. And it's really important that people do their homework. And I want to be extra clear that we're not offering any financial advice in this episode, but we are going to maybe explain how some of these mechanisms work, because we're not, it's never a good idea for us to like tell people where to put their money, but it is good, I think, for us to explain what's possible as far as like the different strategies that are out there and what some good questions might be for people to ask when they're looking at a project and trying to decide if it's something that they want to participate in. Um, so, with that being said, there are so many aspects to DeFi. There's you can hold, you can save, you can trade, you can stake, you can farm, and some of these things don't really exist in centralized finance. So let's talk about the best way for beginners to get started in DeFi, and I think that starts with like setting up a wallet. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for DeFi, like you said, one of the first steps is setting up a wallet. Whenever you're looking at a decentralized wallet or a non-custodial wallet to manage your funds out of it, like this means non-custodial wallet. We're just talking of a wallet that you can use, like we said, for DeFi to hold NFTs, and that you are responsible of. It's kind of like your custody. You are the one that is responsible for everything that goes into or out of the wallet. This is a big difference from centralized exchanges that have custodial wallets, in which you're not responsible, but they are responsible of the activity in the wallet. Kind of, they are responsible of its security, and your funds like are not your business, but them to take care of, pretty much. So the best alternatives for me, like I would say, to set up wallets would be either MetaMask or Phantom. Phantom has definitely the sickest, like by far UI, but MetaMask is way more uh, agnostic. I would say it can you can use it with all type of networks, and I think that's not necessarily the case with Phantom. And MetaMask has also been there for a way longer time, so it has a lot of functionalities that I'm not sure any other wallet has. These like setting up these wallets is not complicated. Just gotta go to the web page, make sure that you're downloading the right wallet, and then it's a matter of just adding your desired network, and in some cases, adding the respective token that you're looking for that precise network. It's I'm just gonna leave it like that, actually, to be honest, because I don't wanna overwhelm them with wallet terminology and the wallet functionalities, because the DeFi is where the sauce really is, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And I for people who are like confused about what is a custodial wallet versus a non-custodial wallet and all of those terms, our partner nonprofit organization that puts out educational content for people who are like brand new to blockchain and crypto puts out a podcast called Crypto Chicks Corner. So the organization is Crypto Chicks, and there's a podcast called Crypto Chicks Corner, and the episodes are like 10 minutes or less, and they're just quick explanations of these basic concepts. And there is an episode on wallets, and there's also one on like what the different types of cryptocurrencies are and how you can use them. So check out those episodes. I'll put some links in the show notes to this for anybody who wants to go check that out. I will say that like MetaMask, for example, people do feel a little overwhelmed if they're brand new to like understanding how to set it up. And I would just highly recommend that you watch a few YouTube videos. There's so many out there that explain like how to add a network and how to import tokens and all of those things. So um, just watch a few to get started. Don't try to like fund it right away. Just play around and see how you can get it set up to your liking before you try to start using it in transactions. And then Also, you mentioned the term UI. I just want to explain that that is user interface for anyone who doesn't know. So it's like the experience you get when you go onto a website. What does it look like? Is it intuitive to know where to click? Does it make sense for someone who's brand new to the platform to know how to use it? So that's what that term means. So awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. So let's say you've got your wallet set up and you want to buy your first cryptocurrency. You're going to go to an exchange. And we have decentralized exchanges and DeFi. So, can we talk a little bit about what that is and then what to do when you want to buy your first crypto?
So decentralized exchanges are pretty much like we were saying that there's custodial wallets and non-custodial wallets. We mentioned that some of these centralized exchanges have custodial wallets, and centralized exchanges meaning that they are a centralized institution, centralized place or marketplace for people to buy tokens or sell tokens or do a lot more activities because they do offer a lot of interesting features. That's one of the most attractive points for them, and they're also an entry point. Like centralized exchanges are completely necessary for the crypto ecosystem, like to onboard new users for the crypto ecosystem. But once users get a little crypto savvy and they want to start using those funds correctly and not necessarily through the centralized exchange, because you happen to face the same the pie getting divided in three pieces problem if you do it through a centralized exchange, you go out. You go on your own way. You go to a decentralized exchange, and you make these funds work for you without giving nobody else any piece of it. Maybe some transaction fees here and there, but that'll be it. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. I what makes another key difference for decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges is where they get their liquidity from. So centralized exchanges, they can get their liquidity from investments from different funding rounds, all types of ways that decentralized exchanges might not be able to. And decentralized, they can even sell kind of bonds in the equity market, as we've seen Coinbase. I'm pretty sure Coinbase have some bonds going on in the market, which helps them pay for their short-term operations and sustainability of the whole company. But this is not necessarily the case for a decentralized exchange. They're not going to be able to raise funds in the NYSE. You see what I mean? Like NYSE meaning the New York State Stock Exchange. But what I mean is just the where these funds come from in the decentralized exchange is us. And a lot of times users. Users can act as liquidity providers. That's one of the most interesting points in DeFi. When you provide liquidity, you're providing liquidity for a pair of tokens. Let's say Bitcoin USD, or let's actually use Metis USD. So if you're providing liquidity for Metis and USD and in a decentralized exchange, this means that you are providing funds to the pool that is used by users to buy and sell funds. Kind of like this pool has the same amount of Metis and USD. And whenever people want to buy Metis with USD, they buy it from that pool. Whenever they want to buy USD with Metis, they do it from that pool. And every transaction involves a little fee, transaction fee, that gets distributed among us, liquidity providers. So that's kind of like one of the most attractive and one of the most popular passive investment strategies. Is not completely risk free. There's some other factors involved, but I don't want to get that much into detail because I think that's something for another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for explaining that. So,
That's a lot of people, just to clarify, that's the well-known farming. A lot of people call it farming. Whenever you provide liquidity and you use those liquidity provider tokens and stake them in farms to get those crazy APRs and super attractive yields on your funds.
yeah, we're going to back up out of that. And I'm going to come back to that here in just a second, ask you to talk about staking and then farming again. But so I think it's important to touch on with these liquidity pools, like the transaction fees that you mentioned. So in when you transact in a traditional bank, there are usually fees involved, and it's the same in DeFi, but it's different because the fees are not going to like a bank or like a centralized organization. The fees are being divided up among the users who are either providing the funds to facilitate these transactions, or in like gas fees is a term used to describe the funds that are paid to the providers that like operate the nodes that run a blockchain. So it's called like mining rewards in some networks. Basically, people are doing the work to like keep the blockchain going, like they're operating their own little piece of the ledger, and so for their work they receive compensation in the form of these transaction fees. And depending on the network, those fees can be a lot. Like on the Ethereum network, if it's extremely crowded, or if it's a time of day where there's a lot of transactions being um, executed on the network, then the gas fees can be really high because it's like you can think of it like a clogged highway. Um, but on many networks like Metis, we because we use that optimistic rollup technology, our gas fees are really cheap. So that's something to consider when you are looking at networks to start doing your transactions on. Like, what are those fees looking like? And because there are a lot of options out there to make those as cheap as possible, but still maintain some security and those principles of decentralization. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about staking. Can you explain what staking is?
Absolutely. So, you know how Bitcoin works, kind of like with a proof of work technology, how people that are mining Bitcoin always have these big machines in their houses, these big computers, kind of like working all day. That's the classic cliche. Whenever somebody talks about Bitcoin mining, you think about this underground facility with a bunch of computers and things. Well, it's because proof of work is based on powering the network through computational power. But in Ethereum, well, not Ethereum, but the Vitalik and brought a new concept, kind of like proof of stake, in which it's not computational power, but it's more as funds. Instead of investing funds in this computer, like in this hardware, and put this hardware to work, and then having to kind of like cash out on your funds, pay for electricity, pay for maintenance costs, and then like the cycle repeats. We're just throwing that away, making it simple, and then just stake your funds. If you stake them, then this way you're kind of like contributing to the network, contributing to its security, and contributing to its development. And that way you're also receiving incentives in the way of rewards, kind of like a annual yield on these funds that you're providing, which is very attractive for investors that are also bullish or optimistic on Ethereum's price. Let's say Ethereum or any other token that is proof of stake. Because I mean, if you're receiving rewards in that token and you expect that token to go up in price, those rewards are going to be very juicy, like in the near future. So it's a very attractive alternative at the moment.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but to be clear, like when you stake, you're putting up your funds and essentially saying like these funds are here, I'm going to hold them here, and this is going to be like almost like the insurance that says I'm going to make sure that the transactions that are occurring on this network are accurate and true and good. And if I want to try to attempt um, any sort of like fraud, or if I want to be a bad actor, as it's called, that I lose those funds. Or if I don't participate in maintaining the security of the network, then the money that I put up, I no longer have access to. So it's like an incentive for people to contribute to a true and honest network, and cut out any like bad actors, as so to speak. Is that correct? Like that's the premise of staking.
Yeah, basically, because I mean, if people have like a lot of funds staked in, like say like that, they don't want the price to crash because they will be crashing as well. So it's kind of like an incentive for everyone to be a good actor because they have something to lose. In this case, well, not in this case, in some cases, funds need to be staked for a certain time period. There's other cases in which you can just stake them, and it's kind of like a flexible staking. So there's these two types of staking, like locked staking and flexible staking. If you want to do like flexible or liquid staking, some other people like call it as well. You don't have to really you don't have to really like lock up your funds. Like you don't have access to your funds and things like that. You can just put them in there, and whenever you want to like take them out, you can also take them out. Ethereum, for example, that was a different case because Ethereum, whenever you lock your funds originally, you like or whenever you have to lock certain amount of Ethereums to become a staker. Kind of, I think it was 32 Ethereums. And once you lock them up, like you're gonna kind of like have access to them once the POS network kind of like once Ethereum 2.0 goes live. So that's an example of a type of staking alternative in which you did have to lock your funds for a certain period of time. But there are some others in which, like we said, let's say NetSwap, for example, is that's a good example, or Tethys in Metis ecosystem. Both of them, you can just stake funds in there, and after whatever time period that you want, you can just take them out.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that seems more clear as far as like staking goes. And now let's talk about farming. So you talked a little bit about that when you were talking about liquidity pools, and liquidity pools can get a little bit complicated in terms of, well, I don't even want to throw buzzwords around that's going to like overwhelm people. So let's just explain like the premise of what farming is, because people will see these like crazy APYs and think, or annual percentage yield, like how much money they can get in return. Like, oh, I can get 1,000% back on this money that I put in. So let's explain what all of that means.
Farming is like we're saying, it's you get these liquidity provider tokens, and that means that you can provide liquidity for a certain pair. Once you get these LP tokens or you look liquidity somewhere, uh, you get you get the LP tokens, but you don't necessarily have to use them right there. In a lot of cases, you can go to another exchange and use them, so like in that other exchange or another platform. Sometimes yield aggregators that are pretty much focused on giving even higher rewards. So once you kind of like get these LP tokens, you can choose what platform you want to put them in, and in that platform is in which you would be kind of like putting your funds for people to trade with them, and that's the platform in which you would be getting kind of like the fees back. So farming is kind of like just the act of locking your LP tokens for people to be able to trade with them. Like once you get your funds back, you're gonna get the same percentage. Like kind of like if you held 1% of the pool, once you take your funds out, you're gonna get 1% of the pool. That won't change. But the pool, since people are using the pool kind of like to buy and sell, the content inside the pool might vary a little bit. That's again from another episode, but that's pretty much the premise of farming, providing liquidity to all these exchanges and kind of like giving them the ability to offer swaps for all these different pairs to their users. Because I mean, like it's very important for users. Like let's say if they bought a token and a token already made them profit and they want to sell a token, they have to be like there have to be a place in which they can go buy and sell a token. So this is kind of like why exchanges offer such high APRs because users get fees and because it's very necessary for the sustainability of the exchange.
Yeah, and again, without getting too in depth with like the mechanisms of liquidity pools, I just think that it's important that people understand that those percentage APYs that you see, they're rewarded to you in the token of that liquidity pool. So it's not like you invest, um, let's say 100 metis or something into a liquidity pool, and you're going to get 1,000% back in US dollars. It's it's in the token that you're like offering up. So I think people need to understand that, and so they don't think like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna times $150 by 1,000 and that's what I'm gonna get in return, because it's not quite how it works. So
Oh
we'll
yeah,
talk a little bit
and in
more
some
about that.
cases, people even like some platforms don't even like pay, or well, they do give you some type of like rewards in the LP tokens, but in some cases they also offer you other tokens. There's some, for example, we were talking about NetSwap earlier. NetSwap is one of those examples in which you can go to their farms and you can get rewards in, like for the same farm, you can get rewards in Metis, Net, and the LPs. And it's just like, holy. And overall, like with all those rewards, you end up getting like 120% APR. So it's very attractive and it gives you a bit of a basket of goods, you know? So you're not getting just one of those. You get the ability, like the ability to get, or the option to get all of those, which makes it pretty attractive. But it's very important, like you said, to see what you're getting, because it could also be the case that a farm is only paying you in certain token, and that token happens to be crashing all day, all night, all week. So those rewards are not going to be worth anything in a week or maybe in a day. So you do have to pay attention to what rewards is the farm paying you. Like what token are you getting in exchange of providing your funds? Because providing funds is a very important, or a very kind of like uh rewarded action. So you might choose well where you can like lock in them, and what's the best alternative for you to get as a reward. What token is the one you like the most, kind of.
Yeah, I think like the thing that you said about like the token reward that you may receive in return could be crashing. Like that's the important thing, because the value of that token may change. And so if the value of it is increasing, then awesome, your rewards are going to increase. But if it starts to go down, then your rewards are going to go down too. So just be really mindful and like understand each of the tokens that are in this liquidity pool before you think like, okay, I'm going to get like 1,000 times the dollars that I put into this. Please understand the
Oh,
mechanisms before
there's
you
a
start
very
throwing them in.
overlooked kind of like habit that people never think about, but I love it because it gives a really good, like a really nice edge over most of people, and it's so kind of like obvious, like it shouldn't even be mentioned. But read the docs. Just read the docs. All the information you need is in the docs. So you just gotta read the docs, and of course, if you need help or if you are not clear with some of the concepts that appear in the docs, one of your alternatives is going to Metis hub of information and kind of like get clarified on all these concepts, all this terminology. Actually, could you repeat me again? Like what's the address? Kind of like the the webpage that they would have to go for the Metis kind of like information hub.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes for people so that you can kind of go and see um, you can go and see like how to read about different projects. But it's also like every project on their website, on their landing page, they should have a docs or document section, like, or you can, it sometimes it's called a white paper on their website. Go to that and it should explain things about how the mechanisms work. And if you're confused, you should always be able to reach out to their team and ask for clarity. You should be able to ask questions, and if nobody is responsive, that's a red flag. So on their Twitter, on their Discord, in their Telegram chats. If you're not sure about how something works, then ask questions. And if you're not getting any feedback or you're not getting clarity, like maybe that's not the project for you.
Absolutely. That's a very important thing. Like you should always be looking for red flags because crypto is a space in which you can get very nice opportunities, but it's also a space in which you have to do your own research. So you do have to keep an eye open and know what you're investing in. Like I think that's kind of like a reasonable thing to do, like researching about what you're investing in, but it's something that a lot of people forget to do and can lead to consequences.
Yeah, because so in the benefit of DeFi is that you're in charge of your funds, and the disadvantage of DeFi is that you're in charge of your funds. So you really have to take responsibility for understanding where you're putting your money. And um, I think it's important that people understand that when you're buying crypto tokens, it's not like buying stocks, because when you buy stock, you're kind of receiving like equity in a company, and that is based on the value of um, the assets and the cash flow of that business, like the potential earning value of that business. But in crypto, um, that's not the case. It's really more based on market conditions and public perception. So there's not a whole lot of regulation in this space, which I think is an awesome thing, but it also just really puts the burden of education on the user. So that's my last little soapbox on, please do some learning. And if you don't know what to do, or you're not understanding, ask questions. Like, just ask more questions, and somebody out there will be able to help you. And again, if they're not, then don't use that platform, use a different one. Because there are a lot of really awesome projects out there, and for every like dev team that's out there to like pull the rug out from under you, and take your money, there are others that are out there really trying to like build a community and empower people. So find your folks, you know. Okay, last thing I wanted to talk about is lending and borrowing, because that is like a huge market in centralized finance, and it's something that just about everybody, I mean, debt is a huge piece of the pie in centralized finance. And if you want to buy a home, or often a car, if you want to pay for your college, like just about everybody in the US anyway has some sort of lending slash borrowing history. So how does that work in DeFi?
It's one of the biggest points, like you said, because that's one of the that's pretty much the case in which they get the biggest piece of the pie. Because I mean, if they're lending money for a, let's say, 5%, and if they're borrowing money, they're gonna be borrowing money for what, three? Like they're always gonna be win. They're always gonna have kind of like a spread, to call it like that. Kind of like they're always gonna have a differential in which they're gonna be making money. And like besides that, whenever you like lend them money or whatever, like those aren't even the only rates that they get. They also have other investments that they get, and they really profit from it, and you don't. In this case, it's different, because like whenever you're lending or borrowing, your like the rates that you get are quickly kind of like adjusting, at least now in crypto. They're quickly adjusting to the market conditions. There's also nobody kind of like trying to get that spread, like that piece of the pie from you. Like users are going to get that piece of the pie, and that's huge if we're dealing with big amounts of money, because we're only going to be talking about transaction fees, maybe transaction fees, but not a percent, like a percentage of the money, or not actual, yeah, like we said, like percentage numbers that the bank or a centralized institution is going to keep from you. Like you're going to get to keep all the money that belongs to you. And I think that's big, because that's a fair thing. That's something that has been people have gotten used to with the centralized banking institution model that we've been living under. But it's going to be great for society to be able to enjoy the full value of their money, and kind of like put their money to work and get everything that is theirs, not having to share it with the centralized institution just because.
Yeah, excellent. That's exactly right. Okay, so lots of different options out there. You can buy and hold assets and watch the value. You can save. There are like these online platforms that you can put your cryptocurrency in, and it acts almost like a savings account. You can trade, you can stake, you can farm, you can borrow and lend. So there are so many options. Figure out. Um, I would recommend starting with one. Like buy some crypto and hold it, or buy some crypto and save it. And if you want to trade, like do small transactions to start. Or if you want to stake, like just take it one bite at a time. Play a little bit. Like don't fill your plate up at the buffet from the start and then try to like shove it all in your face at one time. Like you can go back for as many trips as you want. So just take your time, pace yourself, don't overdo it. And then once you feel comfortable, like trust yourself in knowing when you can kind of move forward, but take it slow. Let's talk about some of the key DeFi partners on the Metis network, for example, that people can explore. So we have quite a few DeFi protocols that people can start using or kind of reading through the docs and seeing which ones might be a good place to start. You want to name a few of those or talk about some of the places that you think people should look if they want to start in the DeFi network on Metis?
Absolutely. So I've always made very clear that I'm a big fan of Tethys Finance as well. Tethys is one of the most kind of like it's the best exchange in terms of UI. I would say it also gives a big variety of alternatives, not only staking but also farming and also lending and borrowing. So it's kind of like the whole package in there. You can also kind of like what we're talking about, locking liquidity for then providing it to farms. You can do both in Tethys. So this is pretty good for kind of like for users to get kind of like a how do you call it in the US, a one stop, like a everything
One
in
stop
one
shop.
stop type of thing. Yeah, exactly. So Tethys is very good for that, and it's one of the most popular like Metis AMMs as well. Besides Titis, another big player, I would say it's, I don't know, Beefy Finance. Beefy Finance, it's also really big, but it's not the same as Titis because Beefy, it's a yield aggregator. What does it sounds complicated, but it's really easy. It just gets the same farms that you find in Titis Finance or in MITI decentralized exchanges, and it deploys another like more strategies on top of them to earn even more yield on top of this yield. So it gets kind of like optimizes the yield. They also call it a yield optimizer in some cases, but it's if you're only looking for highest rewards, this is a way kind of like very attractive alternative. Like TD is one of a like you said one stop shop, and over here it will be kind of like you know what you're looking for. You know you want those high yields. You go over there because you know that they will be getting you that high yield on the same farms that you would find anywhere else. If we go to some other participant, we could also mention Agora DeFi in Metis because Agora it's one of our biggest lending and borrowing partners, and they people haven't talked as much as they should about Agora. I think that's one of the big players that is gonna come up in 2022 because, like you said, that's one of the sectors in DeFi that is growing by the minute, lending and borrowing, and Agora makes all of it easier and accessible. So that's also a big name for Metis DeFi. I don't know. Another one would be maybe let me see. I mean, Pickle Finance is very attractive. Starstream Finance is very attractive. Hermes is very attractive. I'm gonna go with Starstream and Hermes. So Starstream goes by the lines of let's say uh, of beefy finance, kind of like the same yield, the generator, aggregator type of stuff. Well, aggregator, but here is where the generator comes in, because Starstream also offer its own vaults. So it's not only aggregator, it's not only aggregating like more strategies on top of the current strategies, but it's also now creating its own vaults and kind of like creating new alternatives for people, creating new liquidity provision options for users. And also, you can then find the same vaults as you would in some other places, but with a higher yield. So it's not as much as TTs, like it's not as much as the one-stop shop, but it also gives you more than one option as well. So that's another protocol that I like, and it's completely Metis, kind of like Andromeda native. So that's one that people should definitely go look into. And just to close with them, I mean, Maya DAO and Hermes are a very, very interesting project because Maya DAO is kind of like a decentralized, kind of like a currency reserve protocol, but it's controlled by the DAO. So and they kind of like they created or they put out this decentralized exchange, kind of like with the solidly type of vibes, maximizing capital efficiency among like along the protocol. It's basically gonna put money where money is supposed to go, where money is needed. You know how we talked about we being the guys who provide the money to the decentralized exchanges for others to trade with that money. Well, a lot of times people want to trade, but there's not enough funds in the pool that they want to trade. Like it's not, I mean, there are funds, but it's not optimal. It's not efficient. It's they're going to face a lot of price differentials and maybe get hurt monetarily. So this is where Hermes comes in. It maximizes capital efficiency, meaning that it actually moves the money around in a way in which the pools that need it the most get this liquidity, get these funds, and people are able to trade the most popular pair, to say like that, or the pair that they really need to trade with no slippage, no price differentials, no hurting to anyone's pocket. So that's another like that's the one that I'm gonna end, and that's one of the ones that I think it's very, very, very key for Metis ecosystem in general.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do want to touch on like once again, we're not encouraging anybody to like buy any tokens for any projects. Like we are, Metis is a permissionless network, so anyone can deploy a dApp on our network, and we really do try to like build a thriving and collaborative ecosystem. We really love to support the projects on our network to help them get information out to their communities and understand how the mechanisms of their protocols work. And this is just like a menu of options for you to look into and find the ones that feel right for you to try. So, thank you so much, Jose, for going through those examples and explanations of what each of those platforms do, and all the little key pieces of DeFi that we talked about today. There's more, you guys. This is a rabbit hole that goes on for a while, but I think this is a great place to get started. And once again, if like parts of this were still a little over your head or you feel like you need to even move into it a little slower, check out the Crypto Chicks Corner podcast. It's really like baby newbie beginner friendly. So check that out if you need some more support. And once again, I really encourage you to reach out to projects, reach out to the Metis team. If you're looking at a specific platform, go onto their community channels and talk to people and ask your questions because that's how we learn.